live. You are live. It says we are live. So I'm going to check my phone and make sure it actually is the truth. Let's see. It's showing something happening now. Oh yeah, we are live.
Yay. Love it when technology plays.
Yep. I don't want to double. I'm going to shut it down. Okay. So we are live in the Facebook group, amazingly. Yay, technology working. So hello, everyone. If you're catching this with us, let us know in the comments. If you're here or if you catch the replay, I'm Kaylee Rose, author of the Suburban Prepper Mom blog. If you're watching this in my group, welcome to the group. You've probably been aware of the First Light Challenge we've been doing for the month of June, where I've encouraged us all to work on our well-being and our personal resilience by getting up each morning and just getting natural light on our skin and doing some grounding in the grass before we look at our phones and get thrown into that world of social media and everything we have to do in our day. So, and that's, as preppers, as people who care about what's going on in the world right now, that's just part of our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, and resilience building. So who I have here with me today is Kari Dunlop. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Great. And Kari is essentially a light expert, and she's done some recent certification, and she has some really cool info to share with us on light therapy and different frequencies of light, and how to just continue this journey when it comes to using light to boost our well-being. And Kari, I'd love to hand it off to you and let you introduce yourself better than I can.
That was awesome, Kaylee. So my name, Kari Dunlop. I came into the quantum biology world through my own health challenges, which started 30 years ago. I had gastroparesis, which became Lyme disease and then mold toxicity. So leptin, which we'll talk about later, is a biomarker for mold, and mine was high. And then after COVID, it got super high. So I actually had a consult with Dr. Jack Kruse. So anybody in the light world will know that he's the OG sort of godfather of all of this work. He's a neurosurgeon and a dentist, and I think the smartest doctor I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So just through my own experience, and I've had crazy, amazing changes. And I just want to say kudos to all of you for starting this in June, when sunrise is at 5:21. As opposed to Christmas when it's at like 8:44. But yeah, it's a matter of consistency and, never letting perfect be the enemy of good. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, I also work with inherited family trauma. That's kind of my main gig. I'm a certified functional medicine practitioner and a certified quantum biology practitioner. So those are sort of the official stats.
Wow. Very cool. I love that. Yeah. And I love hearing your background with mold too, because people know that we have a lot of history with mold in our home. We've had to really fight it, really purge. The furniture behind me and the whole living room behind me is all brand new because we had to gut our living room and kitchen a couple of years ago, and then found more mold in other places and gutted that too. And done a lot of natural health stuff related to detoxing from mold. And I'm really curious about some of that too. Maybe that's a separate conversation, but I'd love to get your thoughts as we start off just on a little bit more about what quantum biology is and what the certification is that you received through Dr. Jack Kruse. So you got the certification?
No, it's through the Quantum Biology Collective. And
okay.
So that's spearheaded by Meredith Oak, who had her own chronic fatigue challenges, and Carrie Bennett, who, you want to start following her on Instagram. She's the lead faculty, and I've been working with her just through my own health. She's one of my team in terms of just crossing that finish line. I'm like 85% better, but there's still a couple tweaks that we're making and just implementing. There's strategies in terms of how we implement these different quantum practices. So it's basically light, water, and magnetism. and using Mother Nature to heal, and understanding how our health has been compromised the more we're indoors, under indoor lighting, in front of screens, how that's really affecting our health in terms of, non-native EMFs and blue light toxicity, and not getting the programming we need from morning sunlight.
Yeah.
Throws our circadian signaling sideways.
So can you talk about that, the programming we get from morning sunlight? Because that's something I've done some research on, and I've shared a little bit in some of my Instagram and TikTok reels about morning light, as I've done this challenge for last month. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on why particularly morning sunlight is so valuable.
Well, it sets us up for the day. So all of our organs and our cells have clocks in them, and they run on the 24-hour circadian signaling. So if we have strong circadian signaling, then everything knows what it's doing when it's supposed to do. So there's a quote I love. It says, every organ and cell has a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour clock. Morning light is the first signal of the day. It's like punching a time clock at work. And so getting in sync with this signaling is key. And so we get red and infrared light first thing in the morning. Ideally, if we could get out a couple of minutes before actual sunrise and then stay for a couple minutes afterwards. Some people, like I've been staying out for an hour, just depending on what kind of health conditions you're working with, but it is quantum. So a little does go a long way. And I always say, there's no sunrise shaming, but more is better in terms of just keeping that consistency going. And regardless if you miss it one morning, just get outside first thing, because that's going to sync up your signaling just with whatever light is available to us. But it's really important that we don't expose ourselves to any artificial indoor light before we get outside. So if we can't turn on the lights, unless they're red bulbs or incandescent bulbs, putting on blue blocking glasses if you're getting exposure to street lights or other indoor lights, and then taking them off when you get outside, and just, facing the brightest part of the sky, bare feet if you can. I don't do bare because having had Lyme, I'm still a little nervous. But once your redox potential increases, then you have more capacity to withstand any kind of exposures, whether it's ticks or pesticides or environmental toxins, et cetera. And Dr. Kruse has a great saying, redox before you detox. That's really building up your mitochondria potential, because it's, this whole world looks at health through the mitochondria perspective versus genetics. And the mitochondria runs at or the cell runs at a negative net charge. So that's why gathering electrons and grounding is so important. It really becomes a game of gathering electrons. We want more electrons than what we lose. And we lose electrons when we're in front of screens and computers and artificial light at night. So and then the next window of light that's really important is UVA light, because that signals our hormones and neurotransmitters. So all of our dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine gets triggered. And so that's really a great time. And serotonin. So people with gut issues and motility issues and IBS, if you can expose your tummy to the sun at that time, it's really super beneficial. Going for a walk, Kari Bennett, who I'd mentioned earlier, she always tries to encourage people to try and go for a walk at UVA. UVB, of course, is the vitamin D time. So UVA is when the sun is from 10 to 30 degrees in the horizon. UVB is when it's 30 plus. And there's this really
kind of that stronger, like midday sun. Or
it's about an hour. So UVA. So there's a great app. I wish I had my phone. I don't have it, but just download the Circadian app. Circadian app, and that will tell you. And there's a free portion; you don't have to pay for it.
Okay.
And then you plug in your location, and that will tell you what time sunrise is, what time UVA rises, what time UVB rises, and then what time UVA sets, and what time UVB sets, and what time sun sets. And so, and then all that to say, it's really important to take light breaks through the day, because that, again, it's like our mitochondria wants to know where we are in space and time all day long, so it knows what programs to run. In the morning, we're getting our cortisol boosted, so we can get up and at them for the day. The UVA helps with all of that, like I said, the neurotransmitters and other hormones. UVB, of course, is the big vitamin B or vitamin D. Is when when that starts to process, the cholesterol turns into vitamin D, and you do all this without sunglasses and sunscreen. So I don't know if I said that earlier, because
and not even like right now I have contacts in, but I wouldn't want my contacts or my glasses on either. Like I have really bad vision, but when I've been doing the First Light Challenge, I take my glasses off and try to let that light come into my actual eyeballs.
Yeah, because we got lots of receptors in our eyes and in our skin. And the main receptor is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that takes the code and it decodes it. So it signals all of the processes. So that's like the main one. So that's why, yeah, that's super smart strategy. A little alliteration there, but yeah, to get those, if you have to wear glasses to get your way out of the house safely,
oh yeah,
I'm gonna do that. And then, yeah, just flip them down and look to the brightest part of the sky in your bare feet. And a lot of people like to do gratitude practice because that helps to increase oxytocin, which is kind of a nice way to stack different habits and do a lot at the same time. But yeah, so with the grounding, gathering electrons, is, like I mentioned earlier, health is really about the game of more electrons versus less. And it's the currency of energy for the body. And so we can do that by standing on the grass, cement, dirt, rocks, anything really except for asphalt or decking in our backyards. Or and if you're like me, I don't go out in bare feet right now, but there are shoes or socks that are one company is called Harmony 753, I think, and they sell conductive shoes and socks. So I have flip-flops that I wear all summer long that help to gather more electrons. So
yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I have to be careful when I'm in my bare feet because I have some thistles in my grass, and so I have to like really watch. And yeah, and then I'm careful of the critters too, because we have I've had some ant bites, but yeah, I try to get out in the morning and in my bare feet, and that's when I weed my garden when it's nice and cool.
Oh,
yeah,
great!
And I always like lift up. I think it's so cool how even I made a post today on my Instagram how like in the morning, even my plants lift up their leaves to the morning light. Like they're always lifted up so pretty in the morning. And I'm like, I'm doing that too. Like, thank you, God, for the day and that I'm here.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's so, it's easy to, and we know it's like, yeah, nature's good for us. But if I would encourage people to dive deep and, if you're like a science nerd, to really, explore Dr. Kruse's work. He's got some interviews that he's done with an Australian doctor, because Dr. Kruse is like I said, he's the smartest person.
Yeah, I've been watching some of his stuff and wow.
Yeah. So Dr. Goulaine, he does some interviews with this doctor from Australia, which is great because Dr. Max, he'll kind of take what Dr. Kruse says and he'll kind of summarize it and just kind of make it a little more digestible. And Kari's great at that too. She's, very digestible way to take in and apply this information. But there was an article Dr. Kruse wrote, and he's, he basically nothing can take the place of the sun. We live here in Canada, and you look at the leaves on the trees and they're out from May till, October. And we're part of nature. And just like photosynthesis impacts the growth cycles of the trees, they impact our own health and wellness. And so being able to, and he also talks about how if our body creates something internally, we shouldn't take it exogenously. So vitamin D supplements, melatonin supplements aren't super ideal unless you're working with a quantum biology, I would even say physician, who can guide you on that, because ideally in the summer, our exposures to the sun stores the vitamin D in our liver, and we have enough to use through the winter. But also melatonin becomes the primary hormone during the winter. So, but I want to mention leptin because have you heard of it, Kaylee?
No, please explain.
So most people haven't. It was only discovered in 1992, and it's one of the 4 major hormones, and it's one of the biomarkers for mold. And so when I was getting all my testing and initial diagnosing done, it came back at like 47 or something, and it's supposed to be under 10.
Oh, wow.
And leptin can affect our immune system, our sex hormones. Oh, I wrote a list here because there's a lot. Thyroid, regulates bone mass, menstrual cycle, blood pressure, heart rate. And the biggest clue to if you have leptin, so if you have insulin resistance, you're going to have leptin resistance because they work in opposition to each other. And so leptin basically runs the programming in our body that lets us know whether we need to eat or not, how much energy we have stored on our body. And so if it's not working properly, we'll have like junk food cravings and carb cravings, and we'll never feel full. And they don't test for it unless you go to like a specific naturopath clinic, etc. It's a 12-hour fast. They test your leptin levels because there's no drug for it. There's no pharmaceutical for it. It's all lifestyle practices. And so mine was high years ago at 47 when I had the mold exposure and stuff. And then I had a test and it was 102. And so that's what prompted my consult with Dr. Kruse. And after 15, so basically I talked to a practitioner. He said, you had the metabolic function of someone who weighed 500 pounds. So it really is instrumental in, our biological processes and stuff. And so through doing sunrise every day, I missed a handful, but I've brought it down to 29.9. So it's just double what it's supposed to be now. But a big cue, if you have leptin resistance, if you don't want to go and do the blood work, is doing all the right things, eating the right ways, exercising, and not being able to lose weight. So weight loss resistance and inflammation are kind of telltale signs of leptin resistance. So it's a big deal, and a lot of people don't know about it. And so keep on getting up there with the sun. And also like blue light exposure affects leptin resistance, eating after dark. So, which gets, again, a little tricky here in Canada in the wintertime, but we shouldn't be eating 2 to 3 hours before we go to bed. And especially not after the sun sets. So.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that before, like not eating too close to bedtime, but I've never heard it in relation to blue light or the sun having set already or leptin. So that's really interesting. And just, can you clarify too, what's the association between leptin and morning light? So my understanding is that the morning light helps power our mitochondria, right? So is that what you're talking about?
Well, and leptin, so in the morning, you don't want to eat. So if you are like me and have leptin resistance, Dr. Kruse has a whole protocol on what you do. And one of the main things is not eating any carbs at breakfast. So you want to eat within 30 to 60 minutes after sunrise, and like 25 to 50 grams of protein and then some fat, because the carbs will affect our insulin resistance, and it won't give our leptin a chance to do a body read in terms of how much we need to eat or want to eat. And so it messes with all the signaling. So you want to make sure you eat. And he's also a big proponent of eating seasonally and locally, because even food gets the light code. So if we're in Alberta eating a pineapple in January, it's going to cause inflammation and chaos because the body doesn't understand how to interpret that. And so it's super fascinating. And melatonin. So that's the other thing. If we're eating too late and we're exposed to screens, because screens will jack up our cortisol if we're exposed to that blue light. And blue light's getting a lot of bad press, and it's deserved when it's artificial blue light, because when we're outside in nature, the blue light is in balance with all the other frequencies in the light. So if you're working from home, you want to crack a window open, because that will let the light in and balance the frequencies off your screen. And also there's some software things you can download that help to dampen the blue light from the screen. So Iris is one, and Flux, and then also for your phones, turning your phones red. So Twilight app for Android, and then you can Google how to change your settings for iPhone. But it's great because it's makes you less interested in checking your phone and checking your computer, because you're not getting the dopamine hits from the blue light, because it's simulated from the casinos, the blue light from the screens of the machines in the casinos. They just
that's interesting. Hey, that they that there's that almost intentionally addictive.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, actually Dr. Kruse met with so he interviewed the Dr. Huberman, and kind of corrected him on a few of pieces of information that Dr. Huberman wasn't aware of at the time. And I guess as a result of that interview, a kid got in touch with Dr. Kruse, and he's created a screen that doesn't have blue light. And so that's a pretty exciting technical possibility for all of us down the road. I think he's just looking for some investors and creating prototypes and things like that. So
so you could just have an actual screen that it's not like you just turn the blue light off, but it just has no blue light to begin with.
I guess so. That's my understanding. He just dropped a little nugget. I'm part of his monthly subscription webinar attendees, and so which like I said, he's like beyond brilliant. He just takes you down this whole biophysics, thermal, electrical engineering wormhole. But one of the things, because when we're exposed to blue light, when it's not proportion to what the dosing we would be getting outside in nature, it jacks up our cortisol and it activates us. So that's why we're wired before we go to bed if we've been scrolling on our phones or whatever. And then it impedes melatonin production, which most people know is connected to sleep, but it also is responsible for apoptosis and autophagy, which are two really key sort of renovation activities during sleep. So it cleans up broken proteins and gets rid of cancer cells. And so if our body isn't in sync, then again, all those programs aren't working on time when they're supposed to.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So there's so much about our overall well-being connected to just understanding light and getting healthy light. And I know with food, so often, like, nutritionists will say, don't overly focus on getting rid of the bad stuff because you'll drive yourself crazy, but focus on getting more of the good stuff, right? More, and then you'll naturally just do less of the bad food if you get more of the nutrition dense, healthier foods, and your body will start craving those healthier foods. And I've noticed, like, doing this First Light challenge, and I did it last summer and then kind of fell off the bandwagon over winter and kind of restarted again May, June. I've noticed that my body, like, is starting to really want it and starting to be more turned off when I'm getting kind of more the harsher blue lights from my phone screens and stuff. Like I'm just more naturally, like, just disinclined to want to watch a movie later in the evening, and I noticed the difference like a few years ago. And I think there's a whole bunch of reasons for this, but a few years ago, I was diagnosed with adult ADHD. And I did have a lot of those symptoms for a lot of different reasons. Some of them were related to mold. It was related to trauma that had happened in my life recently at that point, stuff like that, but I've been finding that I'm even showing less ADHD symptoms, and I feel more productive and more like able to remember things throughout my day. Like, I feel more on top of things when I start the morning with that first light.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible to me. Like, there's been a couple times this month where I missed it, or I didn't get out till a bit later in the morning where the sun was also already stronger, like say 9 a.m. or whatever. And it was already like, whoa, this, like, it was like, no, I needed that like warm up period of like the earlier light because this light is already feeling like pretty intense to me.
Intense. Yeah. And that's, well, and congratulations. That's great. Awareness to be able to notice the changes, and also non-native EMF can really play a part in those conditions you mentioned. So turning off your breakers to your bedroom at night and unplugging your router, because that gives you and making sure your room is dark and black and cool.
Yes.
You shouldn't be able to see your hand if you're putting it 12 inches in front of your face. Your room should be that dark. And again, just really, and keeping your phone out of your room, of course, not charging it, because your breakers should be off. But if you have to keep it on, putting it in the bathroom or whatever room's close by, because it really messes with our nervous system, this stuff. Cell towers and microwaves and all those things that are people just want to be able to play their video games faster, but nobody's really considering the other pieces of the puzzle, which is our health. And our modern day technology is coming at a bit of a price that I don't think a lot of people are really too aware of yet. So hopefully that will change the more we share the word, spread the word.
Yeah, I also, for me, being a mom of 3 little kids too, and it's really hard to, get them off those screens and be like, no, we're not doing screens after dinner. Like, that's what I try to do. It gets harder in these summer hours with the longer nights, but it's also part of that, like just being like, you know what? No, I'm not going to watch YouTube till midnight, which I'm totally guilty of doing, just so you know. So I'm not trying to be self-righteous, but like,
oh no, I would work like 18 hours a day, and now I'm like, you know what? I don't have any more in my budget. Like, I've probably spent $500,000 in my health over the last 30 years. It took me 19 years to even get a diagnosis. And the great thing with using, working with quantum biology, it's free. Like, nature's free, and so
it's like the best vitamin, and it's free.
Yeah.
And it'll help everything else that you're taking. Like, if you are spending money on supplements or going through different therapies that cost you money, like anything you do with light and getting out in fresh air and just working with like the planet and its natural healing properties, like that's just going to like enhance anything else that you are investing in, right? Yeah. So I was just like, I love what I was getting at too, is like that discipline. Like, if I can demonstrate that discipline to my children about, you know what, I'm going to go outside in the grass, in the sunlight before I start on my social media or doing anything like that. And I've been encouraging my kids to do that with me. And at nighttime too, just saying like, we are biological beings. We're not, our phone shouldn't be like our third arm, right? Like, creating that boundary for ourselves with technology that's healthy and I think about just the real pandemic happening on our planet right now is with mental health or the lack of mental health, and this pandemic of anxiety and depression and what I really think is demoralization more than actual depression, and how important it is to get back to the basics of what actually energizes us as human beings, as biological beings.
Yeah. And going back to our ancestors, right? It's like they didn't have screens at night. They had campfires. And that's why we talk about not having any overhead lighting at night. It's like using, a red or infrared light, putting it on the floor, Himalayan salt lamp or candles or a fireplace. Because if we have something high up, that's where the receptors are, and we're triggering a daytime signaling. And so everything's starting to like get going again. And so if we, I have a red light that I use. I look like Amityville Horror when people drive outside my home, but
us too, in our lamps beside our bed.
Yeah. But my cat loves it. Like my sister, she was over and she's like, oh, that's so relaxing. And, and that increases, that's a whole other topic, is the 4th phase of water, which is easy water, structured water, or coherent water, which is inside of our bodies. And it's got a different viscosity. It's more like honey, and it acts as it's how electrons flow through the body. And it also works as a Faraday cage and prevents toxins from kind of piercing through. But so that's a whole other
maybe I'll have to have you back to talk about water next time.
Oh, it's fascinating. I'm still but the more we can expand, and the morning light helps with the easy water too. So and infrared light, and then the red light helps to expand and charge up the water. So yeah, basically we're beings of water charged, by the sun, and we're battery charged by the sun that's made from water. That's how the saying goes. So so I was supposed to move to Mexico for 2 years, and just build up my redox and the electron potential in my body. But I'm just working kind of with what I have now. But it's that important. And food is 5th on the list. And he even talks about food from the vantage point of electrons, photons, and neutrons. It's not even proteins, fats, and carbs. So in the summertime, because that's when our farmers would be able to grow more fruits and veggies, that's when our body has more capacity, more UV light to be able to move the electrons through what they call the electron transport chain. And it's when that's not happening smoothly that chaos ensues. And so it's a whole, it's like, it's changing it can change so many people's lives, and it doesn't have to bankrupt them. Like, that's why I get so excited about this stuff, because you have so much agency to, change some lifestyle habits, and then ultimately change your life and your family's life. And it's crazy amazing. There's a great book if people really are interested in this. It's called The Mitochondria Manifesto. And so this is a guy who's taken a bunch of people's work, including Dr. Kruse, because Dr. Kruse is really the kind of the first one to put this all together. And just, yeah, it was kind of our handbook in the training I did. So if people want to do a deep dive.
I'll probably try and, because you've mentioned a few things. You mentioned an app and a book, and, Dr. Kruse as a good source of info, and another lady named Kari. And I'm going to probably, after this, I will just maybe over Messenger get you to send me a few links, and then I'll add them in the comments section so that everyone has those links, or you can even post some links too if you want. So what's your goal? Like, how are you going to, you got a certification, so what are you doing with your certification?
Well, that's a good question. So like I said, my primary job is working with inherited family trauma, and that is and I call it the original pandemic, in terms of the stressors that can happen in utero between mom and baby, and also that are heritable between, from attachment issues that mom had with her mom and dad had with his mom. It affects it affects our health, it affects our money, it affects our connection, relationships, trust, receiving, all this, like everything. And people, because it happens before the hippocampus hooks up to the prefrontal cortex, there's no memory. But for a baby who gets, for example, conceived after mom miscarries a baby, it's a very challenging fate to be born in, because mom, her cortisol and adrenaline crosses the placenta, and that baby, that fetus at 20 days old going forward, like I said, there's no cognitive memory, but it gets that all those stress hormones cross the placenta, and you're like if it happens to be you're like a French fry in a deep fryer. And babies will go into fight, flight in utero, and even organize their nervous systems around mom. So that's where people pleasing and overgiving can start, because without mom, mom's our life insurance policies. So without her, we don't, live to eat for very many days. And so if mom's okay, then we'll be okay. And it's just an unconscious coping mechanism. And that's just one event. Like, we look for any physical or emotional separations from conception to 10 years of age. So mom could be in the hospital. It could be there's a case where a gal who, at 13, her best friend ditched her for a cooler group, and she was devastated, and she'd go up to her room every night at 9 o'clock and pull out her hair. And we work with verbal and nonverbal trauma language. So that pulling the hair is nonverbal trauma language.
Yeah.
And, but we work with the parents to help the kids, because the kids are just expressing what's repressed in the system. So in working with her, we discovered that when she was 2 or 3, she was in the hospital. And again, no cognitive memory from her, and her mom would come and visit. So it was very benign, but her mom would have to leave at 9 o'clock because there were other kids at home. And so that break in the attachment impedes her from being able to have a full self, a core, what I call Gouda. And as a result, we're left with Swiss cheese. So when the event happens when she's 13, it's over amplified, because we don't have a self to be able to kind of soothe and calm ourselves. And so, all that to say, there any physical or emotional break from conception to 10 years of age. And if we'd had the picture perfect childhood, which I see there was 6 families on the planet who got that, we can still inherit the stress response. It's the FKBB5 gene, which regulates depression and stress. We can inherit that both from mom's side and dad's side. So I call that the original pandemic, because so many of us have it, and we don't know how to connect it to the challenges we may be facing now. But all that to say, I want to bring in the light, the quantum biology pieces to work with anxiety and depression, because there's so much, even the cold plunging that a lot of people are hearing about now, that can increase your dopamine by 250%. I'm in the best mood after I have like a 2-minute cold shower. And you can start with your face, you can start with your wrists. Women shouldn't do it as long or as cold as men because of, hormones. It can really impact hormones, but yeah, there's so much that we can do with respect to using nature. Just going for a walk drops our cortisol. Watching running water decreases our stress response by 15 to 30%. And it can be on YouTube. We can just be watching the oceans wash up along the beach. If we're landlocked, we can just have that going on in the background, or have a little fountain bubbling in the garden or the yard. And birdsong, listening to birdsong for 6 minutes, I think drops our cortisol by, I can't remember the number off the top of my head now, but yeah. So it's a great complement to what I'm already doing. And I'm going to look to add that in as another step or set of tools for people.
Wow. Nature is such a gift. And there's so, people love to talk about how science is set and there's so much we already understand. And some of this stuff gets poo-pooed in kind of your mainstream science world. And it's so unfortunate, because there's just going back to these beautiful basics of hydrating ourselves, going out in the light first thing in the morning, and regulating our system and energizing ourselves naturally. And to me, it's so foundational to resilience. And when we look at everything coming at us in this world right now, saying, when it comes to the economy and political decisions being made, and the destruction of our natural environment, or all these different things, and all the labels that mainstream medical wants to put on things, and say, well, you must take medication to deal with it. And it can feel so overwhelming. And I'm coming from a place of being a medical mom of a baby who had cancer at 5 months old, and another neurodiverse child, and trying to just educate myself about how can I step out of what I call the stress system of all these specialists and doctors and people saying, you have to give your child this, and you have to do this. And then I ask a basic question about, well, what about diet? They're like, well, don't worry about that. You just need to make sure she has this medication, and then her ADHD will be fixed, or whatever it is. Right. And it can get so frustrating and so overwhelming. And that's what I love about this, just the basics of light and grounding and hydrating ourselves, or doing that quick cold shower, or just getting back to life-giving things as a foundation. Gratitude, lifting up our hands to the heavens and just saying, I am here and I'm alive and I'm thankful for that. Right? It's so empowering, and anyone can do it. We don't need hundreds of dollars of extra income to buy all the fancy supplements, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, you should see my cupboard. And Dr. Kruse, when I saw him during that consult, he's like, no more labs, no more supplements for a year. Stop it. All.
Wow.
And it is steeped in science. It's so much so that my brain feels like goulash after a webinar with him, because it looks at biophysics, which is the precursor to biochemistry, which is where most of our medical system operates from, even functional medicine. This is the before, in terms of, because people want to go get all the testing done, which is important, but it's like, well, go out and be in the sun for 3 months and then see what happens to your hormones and your mental health.
Yeah.
Try that first.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm so grateful for Lyme disease. It's such a weird sentence to say, but I would never have gone. And there's still so much to learn, and I just get so excited. And And yeah, like because he says nothing replaces the sun, because so many people who are even in higher latitudes, like, the UK or Northern Europe and stuff, and they're trying to biohack the sun. And he's, there's some leeway that you can play with, but really he's like, get yourself, because he always says you can't get well in the environment that you got sick in. And for me, I started working in film and television like 31 years ago, right when I got sick. And I was working in Lloydminster, so it was further north, in a TV station that had a rooftop of satellite dishes on it. And so like, okay, well, that's a big piece of my puzzle right there. Less sun and more non-native EMF.
Well, is there any other key info you'd like to leave with us? Or, because I'm looking at the time and just want to, I want to keep this short enough that people who go to watch the replay are like, yeah, I'll watch that, right? Because sometimes if it's too long, people just go, oh, that's too intimidating to watch it all. So, but is there any key info you'd love to leave with us? Also, please share anywhere if you have an Instagram or anything we can follow you on.
Yeah, so my Instagram is just kari.dunlop, like the tires. Okay. And then my website's just karidunlop.com. I don't have any of the quantum stuff yet on my website. That's going to be my project after summer holidays. But it's really, sunrise is number one. And if you were someone like me who really struggled, like I couldn't get off the couch to get to the kitchen at one point. And so if you're someone like that, don't stress yourself out. Don't stress. Just get out at sunset. And get that exposure and get that time and get that sinking. But the one note or the quote that I wanted to leave everybody with is, nature is not a place to visit, it is home. And that's by Gary Snyder. And that gives me chill bumps. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. And and just know there's more answers. We go through life looking at the sky through a straw, and both, all the work I do, it's about dropping the straw and seeing the sky in its full aperture and knowing there's more. There's just more. There's more resources. There's more tools.
Yeah. I think, and having that abundance mindset and realizing that there's so much for us and so much that's on our side.
Yeah.
Really can be such an incredible shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting emotional because it means a lot to me. I really appreciate having you on, and I feel like I'm going to have you on again so you can share more with us at some point on some of the other things that you are well studied in. But
oh, well, thank you. And it's been great because I'm sharing it with my family, and they're doing things and changing some lifestyle practices, and like you said earlier, it's about what we can add and not focusing on what we're losing, but what we're implementing, and no step is too small. If your moms are also busy, if you're tracking your sunroof and driving your kids to school and getting the light that way, or taking your first meeting outside, hardwiring your computer, so it's connected to the Ethernet. And that's another thing. Sorry, I wanted to mention too, is just in terms of because Dr. Kruse thinks that's the biggest sort of predator in our world right now, is just all the exposure to non-native EMF. And so to get a building biologist in to check your house and measure the frequencies and then help to mitigate some of those exposures. But you can start by turning your breakers off to your bedroom at night and plugging your router and those little things. And I noticed a huge difference in my sleep doing just those little things.
Yeah.
So so happy long weekend. I know that's not time sensitive because some people will be watching this later, but for those of you who are getting ready, have a lovely long weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And I will check comments after this and respond as necessary. And we'll put a few of those links in the comments too. Or if you're watching the replay of this on YouTube, then I will leave everything in the description. Thanks all.